Hello, and welcome to the next chapter in our Chapter a Day series going through the book of Genesis. We're now at Genesis chapter 24. If you've been following with us, you've been watching how God fulfills his promises, how God makes promises to people and then he causes them to come to fruition regardless of how the physical circumstances may look, the physical reality at the time of the promise, God brings it about. And this becomes a huge encouragement to us as we think of God's great promise, the promise that he gave at the beginning of Genesis, when the first man and the first woman fell into sin. They entered into disobedience and were separated from God. And how even as God is talking about what will be the natural consequences of their disobedience, within it, he talks about a promise. He talks about one who will come through the line, one who will be born of a woman who will bring victory. And we've been watching step by step how God is working his plan out through human history, now specifically through the family of Abraham. Which brings us now to chapter 24, starting to read at verse 1. Now Abraham was old, well advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge over all he had. Let's stop here before we get into the charge that he makes to his servant. It's important that we notice what we're told here at the beginning of chapter 24. Now Abraham was old, well advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. I want you to notice here the wording. The Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. This is important because this goes back to the initial promise. When God called then Abram out of Haran and said, you're going to go from everything you know and go to a place that only I can show you. He said, I am going to bless you and make you a blessing. He said, those who bless you, I will bless, and those who dishonor you, I will curse. And through you and through your line, all the nations of the world will be blessed. So now we look decades later from that initial promise that was made. We see that the Lord has been faithful. The Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. He said, I will bless you and make you a blessing. That is what has taken place. Now let's see what he is going to say to his servant. Put your hand under my thigh. Now in verse 3, that I may make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell, but will go to my country and to my kindred and take a wife for my son Isaac. The servant said to him, perhaps the woman may not be willing to follow me to this land. Must I then take your son back to the land from which you came? Abraham said to him, see to it that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my kindred, and who spoke to me and swore to me, to your offspring I will give this land. He will send his angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this oath of mine. Only you must not take my son back there. So the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham his master, and swore to him concerning the matter. Abraham is commissioning his servant for a mission. And the mission is to find a wife for his son Isaac. Because, of course, just as Abraham and Sarah needed to be a couple in order for them to have Isaac, in the same way, Isaac now must have a wife so that he can continue the line, so that they can continue to have children, because the promise of God is based on procreation, on them continuing. Now, I want to point out here, just because it's likely to raise some questions about what Abraham asks his servant to do. It says he tells his servant to put his hand under Abraham's thigh. There is some discussion about that as far as what it means. Some have speculated that it's an act of subservience to place your hand and have your master place his thigh upon your hand, showing that you are under his power. That argument for that interpretation is somewhat weak. In all likelihood, as much as it seems strange to us today, it likely referred to putting his hand close to Abraham's genitals, where the mark of circumcision was upon him, the proof of the covenant he had made with God. So in effect, by the servant placing his hand under Abraham's thigh, there is that sense that not only is he making an oath to Abraham, but he's also making an oath to Abraham and to God, because of the covenant that God has made with Abraham and the physical proof of this covenant, the human requirement of the covenant of the time through circumcision. So that's likely what is happening here. There is the symbolic gesture that his hand is close to Abraham's genitals that have been circumcised, showing that he is submitting and under the authority of the covenant. And so he's being sent, said, I don't want you to find a wife among the people here. Because Abraham has the sense that they are separate from the peoples there, that they are a separate entity of the peoples there. So he wants him to go back to the family clan community where Abraham had come from. And back in the earlier chapter that we didn't have time to go into detail, in chapter 22, it mentions in chapter 20 what has been happening with Abraham's extended family. And we're told there that Milcah has also borne children to your brother Nahor. Uz his firstborn, Buz his brother, Kemuel the father of Amram, Chesed, Hazo, Fildash, Jidlaph, and Bethuel. And then we're told in verse 23 that Bethuel fathered Rebekah. And so we see this, and it's of significance because what we're basically told is Abraham's extended family back in Haran have had children. So now Abraham is sending his servant to go back to his people to find a wife for Isaac. And it's interesting because the servant says, well, what happens if I go back there and they don't want to send a wife back with me? The normal practice would be to then to take the bridegroom and bring him to the place where you're seeking the bride, so that he would be present to negotiate the bride price and to make the arrangements to bring the bride. So he would go and get his bride and bring it back. And Abraham makes an important thing. He says, don't take Isaac from the land. This referring to the land of promise. Said, if you go there and they will not release a bride, or the bride will not come back with you, well then you fulfilled your obligation to me. Your oath is complete. But under no circumstances, even if Abraham should die, under no circumstances is his servant to take Isaac from the land. Now, there's a human practical reason for this. Abraham now is a stakeholder in the land. He physically owns property in the land. If Isaac were to leave that region, his physical human title for that parcel of land could be rescinded because he's moved off, and they viewed, okay, semi-nomadic people, they've moved off, he no longer has hold on the land. In all likelihood, that's not what Abraham is concerned about. Abraham now, after all these decades, has an understanding of the promise. Remember how he first came into the land? Way back a number of chapters ago, when he came into the land, and God said, this is the land I'm going to give your offspring. But what do we see Abraham doing? He continues to travel through the land, traveling down into the south. And as he travels farther and farther south, he enters into a land of famine. And he came to that point where he could either return to the land of promise or continue farther out into the world. And he continues farther out into the world, eventually going down and into Egypt. And into Egypt, he comes into his first calamity, his first situation where he uses his old methods and his own old means to try to preserve himself and save his own life. And by doing so, he basically is rejecting the promise God has made. So now, Abraham, all these decades later, is saying, don't take my son from the land. This is where God's promise is. This is where he has told us we are going to be. Now, Abraham has been told that there will be a time when they will be removed from the land and God will bring them back. God gave Abraham that vision. But for right now, Abraham's focus is, this is the land of promise. Don't take the son of promise out of the land. And the interesting thing, too, to note is how Abraham is addressing this. He said, the Lord, verse 7, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my kindred, who spoke to me and swore to me, to your offspring I will give this land. He will send his angel before you, and you will take a wife for my son from there. Abraham is convinced that the Lord is going to fulfill his promises. Abraham is convinced that this is the way he is to find a son, but he's gone to the Lord about it. He is trusting the Lord. The Lord is going to provide a son for Isaac, is going to provide a wife for Isaac. Trusting the Lord to provide. This has come a long way from Abraham trying to work out things totally on his own. He is trusting the Lord. The Lord will go before you. He will send his angel before you, and you will find a wife. Humanly speaking, don't fret. If you get there and it doesn't work, you're free. So there's no stress on you, my servant. But I know the Lord's going to provide. And so we see what takes place. The servant took 10 of his master's camels and departed, taking all sorts of choice gifts from his master, and he arose and went to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. And he made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water at the time of evening, the time when women go out to draw water. And he said, O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show steadfast love to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Let the young woman to whom I shall say, Please, let down your jar that I may drink. And who shall say, Drink, and I will water your camels. Let her be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I shall know that you have shown steadfast love to my master. We have this powerful prayer from the servant. The servant says, I know how you bless my master. I know that you love my master. I've seen it. I've seen how your steadfast love for my master. Well, I'm on this mission. So Lord, I need you. You who have loved and blessed my master, I need you now to guide me in my mission for my master. So here I am, and women are coming out, probably a vast number of them. Lord, this is what I need. I need to know which is the right one. So I'm going to go to one. I'm going to pray that you're leading me. I'm going to go to one. I'm going to ask them to give me water. And if they not only give me water, but are also willing to water my 10 camels, that's no small feat. To supply the water for 10 camels. If they're willing to do that, then I'm going to take that as a sign from you that this is the person that you have appointed for my young master, Isaac. And so, based on that prayer, based on his knowledge of how God has blessed Abraham and God's steadfast love for Abraham, he, trusting God, sets out. Verse 15, before he had finished speaking, behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, came out with her water jar on her shoulder. The young woman was very attractive in appearance, a maiden whom no man had known. She went down to the spring and filled up her jar and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, "Please, give me a little water to drink from your jar." She said, "Drink, my lord." And she quickly let down her jar upon her hand and gave him a drink. When she had finished giving him a drink, she said, "I will draw water for your camels also, until they have finished drinking." So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran again to the well to draw water, and she drew for all his camels. The man gazed at her in silence to learn whether the Lord had prospered his journey or not. When the camels finished drinking, the man took a gold nose ring weighing a half shekel, and 2 bracelets for her arms weighing 10 gold shekels, and said, "Please tell me whose daughter you are. Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night?" She said to him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor." She added, "We have plenty of both straw and fodder and room to spend the night." The man bowed his head and worshipped the Lord, and said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his steadfast love and his forgiveness and his faithfulness toward my master. As for me, the Lord has led me in the way to the house of my master's kinsman." And the young woman ran and told her mother's household about these things. So here we have this incredible moment. The servant, trusting in the Lord's steadfast love to his master, prays to the Lord and says, "Lord, guide me. This is what I'm going to use." And we see the Lord at work. Before he's finished praying, Rebekah arrives. Before he's finished praying, Rebekah arrives. She does exactly what he asked the Lord to be a sign. Not only does she give him water, which was a simple courtesy, but then she does the huge job of watering the camels as well. And then when the servant asks who she is, who does he find out she is? But she is of Abraham's household, the person that he was supposed to be seeking out, to find Abraham's kinsman. In a vast area with many peoples and clans, he finds the first one that he talks to is the person that he is supposed to be looking for. So what is his response? His response is worship. How often do we see God at work, and yet we may recognize that God's at work, but our response is not worship. This servant, when he sees God's hand at work, God honoring Abraham, demonstrating his steadfast love for Abraham, hearing his prayer, acting on it, his immediate response is to worship the Lord. He sees the character of God. He sees how God is at work, and he worships the Lord. He then gives this gift to Rebekah and asks if he can stay with them. Now she goes off to speak to her family. Verse 29, Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban. Laban ran out toward the man to the spring. As soon as he saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's arms, and heard the words of Rebekah his sister, thus the man spoke to me. He went to the man, and behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring. And Laban said, Come in, O blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside? For I have prepared the house and a place for the camels. So the man came to the house and unharnessed the camels, and gave straw and fodder to the camels. And there was water to wash his feet, and the feet of the men who were with him. Then food was set before him to eat, but he said, I will not eat until I have said what I have to say. And Laban said, Speak on. I want you to notice this. There's a lot we see in this servant. We see the attitude of prayer and how prayer leads to his object. His response from that is worship. But we also see there is also dedication. He is on a sacred mission. He is serving his master. He is also helping his master continue to honor the covenant that has been made with the Lord. So he takes a moment to worship the Lord, but then he immediately moves to what he has been called to do. I will not eat until he shares his burden. Before we do anything, before we do any of the pleasantries, before we exercise any more hospitality, I need to tell you why I'm here. I have a mission. So he said, I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has greatly blessed my master, and he has become great, which is fulfillment of the promise. He has given him flocks and herds, silver and gold, male servants and female servants, camels and donkeys. And Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master when she was old, and to him he has given all that he has. My master made me swear, saying, You shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I dwell, but you shall go to my father's house and to my clan, and take a wife for my son. I said to my master, Perhaps the woman will not follow me. But he said to me, The Lord, before whom I have walked, will send his angel with you and prosper your way. You shall take a wife for my son from my clan and from my father's house. Then you will be free from my oath when you come to my clan. And if they will not give her to you, you will be free from my oath. I came today to the spring and said, O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, if now you are prospering the way that I go, behold, I'm standing by the spring of water. Let the virgin who comes out to draw water, to whom I shall say, Please give me a little water from your jar to drink, and who will say to me, Drink, and I will draw for your camels also. Let her be the woman whom the Lord has appointed for my master's son. Before I had finished speaking in my heart, behold, Rebekah came out with her water jar on her shoulder, and she went down to the spring and drew water. I said to her, Please let me drink. She quickly let down her jar from her shoulder and said, Drink, and I will give your camels drink also. So I drank, and she gave to the camels drink also. Then I asked her, Whose daughter are you? And she said, "The daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him." So I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her arms. Then I bowed my head and worshipped the Lord and blessed the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who had led me by the right way to take the daughter of my master's kinsman for his son. Now then, if you are going to show steadfast love and faithfulness to my master, tell me, and if not, tell me, that I may turn to the right hand or to the left. We have this beautiful recounting on the part of the servant, the messenger, of how God has been at work, how God has blessed Abraham and been faithful to the promise, how God directed Abraham, and how the servant is trusting in the same God to direct him, and how everything has pointed to this point, to Rebekah. Now he's saying, now, do you honor Abraham? Do you honor him as your kinsman, as your family? Do you honor the promise and all that has happened here? I need to know. Before anything else, before we do anything else, I need to know. Everything has pointed toward this moment and toward this woman to be Isaac's wife. But I need to know. Let me know now whether you will honor this or not. Then Laban and Bethuel answered and said, "The thing has come from the Lord. We cannot speak to you bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken." When Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed himself to the earth before the Lord. Again, he gives worship to the Lord. And the servant brought out jewelry of silver and of gold and garments and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave to her brother and to her mother costly ornaments. And he and the men who were with him ate and drank, and they spent the night there. When they arose in the morning, he said, "Send me away to my master." Her brother and her mother said, "Let the young woman remain with us a while, at least 10 days. After that she may go." But he said to them, "Do not delay me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away that I may go to my master." They said, "Let us call the young woman and ask her." And they called Rebekah and said to her, "Will you go with this man?" She said, "I will go." So they sent away Rebekah their sister and her nurse, and Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, "Our sister, may you become thousands of 10,000s, and may your offspring possess the gate of those who hate him." Notice here, again, we see God speaking through the people. In all likelihood, they don't fully understand the promise. We're not told here that the servant has explained the full promise of God, of God's promise of making his family a mighty nation. But when they turn to bless Rebekah, at the time of her leaving, the blessing they pronounce over her is, "Our sister, may you become thousands of 10,000s. May your offspring possess the gate of those who hate him." And again, we have this move to this singular, to this one who is coming. Then Rebekah and her young women arose and rode on the camels and followed the man. Thus the servant took Rebekah and went on his way. We may read this and it seems like, wow, this is happening so fast. This seems harsh, but when you see the events happening, it's like God is working. This has been decided. This is God's hand. This is not time to delay. This is not time to simply waste time. God is at working. When God says go, we go. When God says this is the person, this is the person. When God says wait, we wait. And there have been times, we've read of great times of waiting, that Abraham had to wait on God's physical fulfillment of the promise. But at this point, God has revealed this is the person. The family, Rebekah, accept this. And I love the passage where they go and they ask Rebekah. She's not forced to do it. she willingly agrees. I will go. Then we come to the meeting point. Now Isaac had returned from Beer Lahai Roi and was dwelling in the Negev. And Isaac went out to meditate in the field toward evening. And he lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, there were camels coming. And Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel and said to the servant, Who is that man walking in the field to meet us? The servant said, It is my master. She took her veil and covered herself. And the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into the tent of Sarah his mother and took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted through his mother's death. We have this beautiful picture, this description of the meeting of Isaac and Rebekah. A picture of how when God's work is done in God's way, in dependence on Him, on trust on who He is, in seeking the Lord. Abraham sought the Lord in sending out his servant. His angel will go before you. The servant sought the Lord in making the choice. The servant worshiped the Lord when it seemed the Lord was directing him. The servant was dedicated to what was happening, sharing his burden of why he had come, testifying to the Lord. And now we have the time when Isaac, the son of promise, meets Rebekah, the one the Lord had revealed. And he is out in the field, we're told, meditating toward evening, and he sees them coming afar off. And he starts to head toward them. And Rebekah, on her camel, sees this man walking through the fields coming toward her. And she asked her servant, Who is this man? I said, That's my master, Isaac. And she, appropriate for the time, as an unmarried woman, veils herself. And then she comes, and the servant comes, and Isaac, and they meet, and the servant introduces Rebekah to Isaac. This is the woman that God has revealed. This is the woman that your father sent me to find. We're not told how much he tells of the story, how God was at work, how God answered his prayer exactly, revealing Rebekah among all the women that would have been there, directing him to Rebekah, and how Rebekah said, I will go with you. But he chooses her, she chooses him, directed by the Lord. He takes her, they consummate their marriage, they become husband and wife. And we have those beautiful words in the text. And she became his wife, and he loved her. When God is at work, when God is putting things together, it reflects the character of God. The steadfast love of God that he demonstrated in his ways with Abraham, we see demonstrated again, because God is involved in this union. Love is the result. God is involved in the union. Love is the result. It's reflecting the character of God. Now, we're human beings, and we'll see how things go as we move forward, and there will be challenges, and there will be instances where it falls down because of sin at work. But here, right now, we have this beautiful picture. We have the faithful servant. We have the trusting master who has learned about the character of God and his faithfulness to the promise. We have the statement, don't take Isaac from the land. Why? Because this is where the promise is. Don't send him off to other places. Don't take him to other lands. This is what God has given us. We have the journey. We have the result. The promise moves forward. Moving forward for the next generation. as Abram and Sarai become Abraham and Sarah. We now have Isaac and Rebekah. The next step in the fulfillment of the promise of God. And we hear echoed those words pronounced over Rebekah by her family, that you would become thousands and tens of thousands, which reflect back to the promise, I shall make you a great nation. If the stars could be numbered, then your offspring could be numbered. If the dust could be numbered, then your offspring will be numbered. You will have nations come from you and kings come from you. God's promise moving forward. Be encouraged in the promise today. Dwell on that. Think about the faithfulness of God's promises and how he will see them through. Even again, when it seems impossible, standing at the gates of a foreign city as all these women come out at evening to gather water, but trusting that God would direct him when there's no other way he could know. And God is faithful. I hope this encourages you. I hope it gives you something to meditate on. As always, please share this with someone else. And we'd love to hear from you. If you have any feedback, thank you, and God bless you.